Hello, boys and girls. I'm here for another read aloud for you about another very small character. We've read Tom Thumb and Thumbelina. Both were set in Europe, and they were about two very small people who were just about the size of someone's thumb. We have one more story to read that has very similar parts to this fairy tale. However, it's set in a very different part of the world called Japan. Today's story is called Issun Boshi. It is also about another very small person. And Japan is on the other side of the world. We have recently been around this section here in Europe. We went to Denmark, France, England. Now we're going to Asia, which is another continent. Japan is this tiny little red dot here, and it is in an island. Japan is known for having beautiful mountains and old villages, and it has fairy tales just like Europe. We're going to see how this story compares, so listen closely, get your pen and pencil ready to draw as we go, and let's hear the story of Issun Boshi. Long ago, in a village in Japan, there lived an old man and his wife who more than anything wanted a child. They hoped and they wished. They went to the temple and prayed to the gods. May we be blessed with a child, they said, even if he is no larger than our thumbs. And then their prayers were answered. In 9 months' time, a fine baby boy was born to the old couple. The child was lovely and very small. They called him Issun Boshi, which means 1-inch boy, for he was no taller than his father's thumb. Issun Boshi grew up strong, smart, and helpful, though he never grew bigger. When 12 years had passed, Issun Boshi came to his parents and said, "Father and mother, please give me your permission to go to the capital city, for I wish to see the world, learn many things, and make a name for myself." So Issun Boshi asked his parents for permission to go to the capital city. When you ask permission, you ask people to let you do something. Why do you think he needs permission to go travel? His parents were very worried, scared to think of all the bad things that could happen to Issun Boshi in such a large city. But they knew their boy was smart and strong, so they agreed to let him go. They made for him a tiny sword out of a sewing needle. They also gave him a rice bowl for a boat and some chopsticks for oars. Rice bowls and chopsticks are things that people eat with in Japan. In the rice bowl, he floated down the river, using the chopsticks as paddles when the water became rough, and using his sword to catch fish. In a few days, he arrived at the city of Kyoto. That's the capital. My, what a busy city this is, he thought. So many people crammed into one space. Crammed means you're packed in, stuck together. He carefully walked through the streets, dodging feet and cartwheels. He kept walking until he came to a beautiful house, the largest in the city. At the foot of the steps sat a pair of shiny black geta, or wooden shoes. They belonged to the owner of the house, who was the wealthiest lord in the city. I'm starting to see some similarities with another fairy tale. Can you notice the similarities? The door of the great house opened. Out walked a man who put on the shiny black shoes. Issun Boshi called out, "Hello, hello there." The man looked around, seeing no one, began to go back in. But Issun Boshi called out, "Down here! I'm down here near your shoes. Please be careful to not step on me." The man, who was the lord of the house, leaned down and was astonished. He was so surprised. What was so surprising? Issun Boshi bowed and politely introduced himself. "My name," he said, "is Issun Boshi. I just arrived to the city and I would like to work for you." The Lord picked up Issun Boshi in the palm of his hand. In a friendly voice, he asked, "But what can a little fellow like you do?" If you remember Tom Thumb, you remember that Tom Thumb also wanted to do things, but people didn't think he could. Do you think this is going to be similar or different to that story? A fly was buzzing around, bothering the Lord. So Issun Boshi drew out his sewing needle sword. With a quick swat, away went the fly. "You are quite an amazing little fellow," laughed the Lord. "Come work for me, and you may live in my house." And so Issun Boshi went to live in the big, beautiful house, serving the noble Lord. He made friends with everyone there, especially the princess, the Lord's lovely daughter. It seemed that he was always at her side, helping her in whatever way he could, whether by holding down the paper when she wrote a letter, or by simply riding on her shoulder and keeping her company while she walked through the beautiful gardens of the house. In time, the princess came to feel a strong affection towards her little helper. What are some ways that Issun Boshi is helping the princess, even though he's so tiny? In the spring, Issun Boshi traveled with the princess and her companions to the Cherry Blossom Festival. On their way home, they began to hear strange noises behind them on the narrow road. They could see nothing in the shadows when suddenly a huge monster leaped into their path. There's that monster. Everyone screamed and ran except Issun Boshi and the princess. "Who are you and what do you want?" cried Issun Boshi. "I am an Oni," growled the monster. "An Oni, the Oni were terrible creatures who bother the townspeople." But Issun Boshi stepped forward and shouted, "Get out of the way, you demon! I'm here to guard the princess. Step back!" So even though Issun Boshi is so small, he stands up for the princess against the Oni. What do you think you would do if you were Issun Boshi? "Ha! We'll see about that," growled the Oni. Then he snatched up Issun Boshi, popped him into his mouth, and gulp, swallowed him whole. Down, down Issun Boshi slid until he landed plop in the Oni's stomach. "This Oni should be more careful with what he eats," said Issun Boshi. He seems very calm. He pulled out the sewing needle sword and began to tickle the Oni's stomach. "Ah! Ooh! Ah!" shouted the Oni. Then he gave a loud burp, and out popped Issun Boshi. The Oni ran away, burping the whole way home. Issun Boshi ran over to the princess. She was bending down and picking up something from the ground. With great excitement, she said, "Look, Issun Boshi, the Oni was so scared he dropped this magic hammer. If you make a wish on it, it will come true." What do you think he might wish for? What would you wish for if you were Issun Boshi? Issun Boshi bowed to the princess and said, "My lady, I would ask that you make a wish." "No, Issun Boshi," said the princess. "You won this because of your bravery. You should be the first one to wish on it." So Issun Boshi took the hammer and said, "I already have my greatest wish, which is to serve you. But if I could have another wish, I would wish to be as tall as other people." Does anybody else think that might be his wish? So he gave the hammer to the princess, who made a silent wish on it herself. What do you think she wished for? Then and there, Issun Boshi began to grow taller until beside the princess stood a handsome young man. That night, when the princess told her father how brave Issun Boshi had been and how he risked his life to save her, the Lord was so happy that he gave Issun Boshi permission to marry the princess. And so you see, the princess's wish did come true. Issun Boshi's brave deeds were celebrated throughout the land. He and the princess lived happily together, along with Issun Boshi's proud and happy parents, with whom Issun Boshi had bought the Lord's house to be part of his family. So another happy ending. Get ready to start to think about how this story is similar to Tom Thumb and Thumbelina, and then go off and write. Have fun, everyone.